this room doesn't know Janine, but for the international audience that is joining us, Janine Lazarus, as Sophia said, has been a journalist and a consultant and working in media for, we won't say how many years, will we? Let's just say it's over 3 decades. She focuses on obviously working on interviews, news-breaking stories. She's worked with the best of the best in business communication, leaders. You've seen on her bike, some of her clients are BAT, Coca-Cola. She's worked the landscape across Africa. She's worked right out in the trenches in Afghanistan, you name it, she's done it. So Janine, to kick off the session, we're not going to talk about Afghanistan this time, but I do have a question to you. And pole dancing, or pole dancing. I want to actually engage with you about the concept of information overload. I think the reality is that today we have so much information out there at people, and we as communicators are the ones pushing so much of this information out there. How can we do better at making sure that we manage the information overload more effectively?
Daniel, such an interesting question. I've got some notes, and I never speak those notes, so I may or may not look at them. I think that the students doing the TED Talks or request to report, that is exactly the way to communicate. With that kind of brevity, with that kind of spontaneity, using the absolute perfect art of conversation. That's the way to communicate. And now look at my notes. But for that I need my specs, because I'm not talking about youthification.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
The reality check is that things are moving. We're talking about a 24-hour news cycle and a lack of historical perspective that I think has made things, Daniel, and made us dangerously impatient. Old communication, my apologies, silos are rapidly disappearing. And hopefully with them, the meetings about meetings about meetings. Let's be honest, those meetings about meetings often achieve very little, if nothing at all. So the reality check is that what hasn't changed is the holy grail of deadline. I don't know if you have ever worked as a media person. I'm an ex-hard news reporter. Deadline is a holy grail. It's part of the 10 commandments, or maybe it's the 11th one. It's somewhere stuck between thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's chicken or covet thy neighbor's wife. Thou shalt obey deadline. If you're not on the deadline bus, the bus is going to leave the station without you. So how do we get to meet these ridiculous deadlines that the media set for us? Well, the future is really all about making real-time decisions. Like the students talking on the panel debate on youthification, to the Twitter generation, a week feels like an age. Whatever is happening fast, and it's happening right now. So the leaders in business that I work with have the unenviable challenge of communicating quickly. It's really not enough just to be an executive with phenomenal credentials, with an amazing business card that reads like alphabet soup. What you need to be is an expert communicator, and you need to land your message quickly. You need to get in and get out. I'm going to tell you that when I first started as a media consultant and a media trainer some 20 years ago, I worked for one of the top 4 auditing and accounting firms. They loved what I call this, and I specially brought it. And I'm actually going to record this if I can. They loved this. Did you hear that? Let me try it again. They love that, and that's called the thud factor. It's a thing of the past. It didn't sound like a thud, did it? It's a thing of the past. The thud factor is no more. People need to be messaged. They need to be messaged quickly. They need to be messaged efficiently. Rapid technological disruption, the rebalance of world power, the continuing economic uncertainty, all of these things combine to create highly volatile and increasing complex messages. So making this even more difficult for communicators like me and like you is that we need to draw through these immense volumes of information and translate complex issues into easy to understand terms. So therefore the thud factor no longer works. We need to draw through and create clear messaging. Today, a CEO shares the stage with a much younger and often self-taught opinion maker who for the most part has a natural talent, like our TED presenters, to get their message across in news their audience can use. And in order to remain relevant, it's absolutely critical for them to adopt an agile approach and to reduce complex messages into short, powerful sound bites. So my advice to you is broaden your social circle. Find people like me who shoot straight. Find people who are brutally honest. People who have no filter. People who tell you what you need to hear, not necessarily what you want to hear. And if I can say, as a last bit of advice, be very careful about believing everything you hear and everything you read, and even listening to everything and taking everything at face value, even from people like me. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's one way of opening. Fantastic. Thanks, Janine. I think something that's very interesting when we talk about communicating in clear, concise bites. We know the Twitter era, we know the 140 character generation, but I read some very interesting research, and I think it's very applicable to us as communicators, where only 3 years ago people were exposed to up to 4,000 audio and video or visual cues per day. Today that's up to 7,000 per day. So if you can't cut through that clutter, we as communicators, if we cannot cut through that clutter and be one of the 7,000 messages that's actually relevant